You know, we so far this morning have honored and remembered those that died in wars so that we could be here this morning. If it wasn't for them, who knows whether we'd be free or not? Probably not. And how much longer we're going to be free, we don't know that either. But you know, the people that we honor, I believe, are heroes. What do you say? They're heroes because they have given their lives for us. But in the book of Hebrews, if you'll turn to chapter 10, please, there's other heroes that we're going to look at this morning that we should remember. Now, these heroes lived a long time ago, and they did things that were amazing when you think about it. You know, all people live by faith. It's called natural faith. You drink the water out of your spigot. Do you trust that there's nothing in the pipes that would hurt you? You eat food that comes in cans with labels on it. How do you know what's in that can? We trust our money. We give it and we earn it. We think it's going to be worth something. We eat in restaurants. We have no idea what goes on in the kitchen, do we? But we trust that. We go to the doctor. We go to the hospital. And he takes us into a little room, and they open us up. Who knows who's there? Who knows what they take out or put in? You trust them, don't you? That's natural faith. We drive places and we trust the street signs, don't we? You see, people all live by natural faith. But as long as we're living in natural faith, and those people that live in natural faith, they don't have anything to do with God a lot of times. That's called spiritual faith. So we all live in natural faith, but there's only some that live in spiritual faith. These heroes that we're going to look at this morning had spiritual faith. And a spiritual faith is a gift from God. It's a supernatural gift from God. We realize something in the future, and we bank on it that it's real. That's spiritual faith from God. Some things you can't see, touch, or hear, but we still believe it to be true, don't we? Because of God's word. Spiritual faith goes against the world. It goes against everything that we're hearing on the radio and television and the internet. They want nothing to do with spiritual faith. Nothing. And they think that the only thing that matters is themselves. Is that right? I want you to look, if you would, in chapter 12 to start with today. Hebrews chapter 11. When we think about the world and what it has, there was a man named Moses who lived by faith. Look at verse 23, if you would, 11:23. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child. They were not afraid of the king's commandment. Did Moses' parents have faith? Yes, they did. Did they pass it down? Yes, they did. 24, by faith, Moses, when he came to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Folks, Moses was the next in line to be Pharaoh, many say. But when he got into the Pharaoh's house, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh. Choosing rather to suffer afflictions with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Now, that's what we need to do. We need to refuse living in this world, practicing natural faith, ignoring spiritual faith. Moses gave up everything to serve the Lord. Was that faith? Yes, it was. When these people lived by faith, they died, and never did they receive the things that were promised them. We'll look at that a little bit later. Every one of these people lived by such spiritual faith that all they relied upon was the promises of God found in his word. Now, should we honor them for that? Should we take on their traits for that? Trusting the promises of God. Folks, they didn't have the whole Bible. They didn't know about the cross. They didn't know about all the things that we know about, and they still trusted God. There's an acronym for faith. I don't know if you ever heard it or not. For forsaking all, F-A. I trust him. Faith. Forsaking all, I trust him. Pretty good, huh? Next time you see the word faith, think about that. Forsaking all the culture, all the nonsense, all the stuff that's going on. We're going to forsake that and trust the Lord. Remember that. What is faith? We're going to look at that in just a second. First of all, in order to have spiritual faith, we got to believe that God exists. Secondly, we need to make sure that we seek God. Here's the difference between natural faith and spiritual faith. First, make sure you believe that God exists, and many of them don't. We must seek God. We've got to believe some things that you've never seen. Faith pleases God. You're going to see that. You cannot please God without spiritual faith. And you're looking for God's reward someday. Look, if you would, in chapter 10 of Hebrews, back one page. Verse 38. The just shall live by faith. If any man draw back, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. Another word for just is righteous or saved. The just, the saved, the righteous, the saints, they need to live by faith. Just shall live by faith. That's repeated 3 or 4 times in the Bible, and it's a true statement. You've got to live by faith. Not natural faith, we all do that, but spiritual faith. And that's who we have in chapter 11. Let's just look at a couple of them if we could. First, we'll look at verse 4, and we're going to take these characteristics of these heroes of faith and try to apply it to our lives. That's what it's all about. By faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice. Now, you remember Cain killed Abel? And the reason was because he was jealous. He hadn't brought the correct sacrifice. God had told him, his dad, what the proper sacrifice was. Now, did he know anything about the cross, the sacrifice that Jesus would make? All he realized was what his father had told him, that this sacrifice should be blood. Without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. Abel stood on the promises of his dad, who followed the promises of God. Look at verse 5. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death. Enoch never died. Did you know that? He was translated up into heaven. He was walking with God, and he just went up. Wow. Only I wish I could do that. But did Enoch know this? No. But he trusted God because he walked with God. Do you walk with God? Do you walk with him every single day? Do you talk to him? Do you trust his promises? He should not see death and was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. Every place you look, these people pleased God. Verse 6, but without faith it is impossible to please him. If you don't have spiritual faith, you're not going to be accepted. You've got to have that. It's impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, first of all, believe he exists, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. You know what? I haven't gotten the rewards down here, but I'm going to get them in heaven, and I can't wait. I heard a preacher say one time that he hasn't gotten his paycheck yet, but when he gets to heaven, he'll get it. When I get to heaven, first of all, I want to hear the Lord say, well done. And secondly, I want to have people that I've seen come to the Lord come and shake my hand. Now, you might say, well, that's selfish and egotistical. No, it's not. That's what I've been doing for 40 years, seeing people get saved. I've only gotten one letter from somebody that got saved 15 years ago. He was an MMA fighter, and he came to church one Sunday. He accepted the Lord. He wrote me a letter, and he said, Charlie, I listened to your message, and I gave Jesus my heart. But when we get to heaven, all of us, we've all had a part of people coming to the Lord. That's going to be our reward, and I can't wait. How about you? But if you've not done anything for the Lord, if you haven't pleased the Lord, if you haven't done anything to see his kingdom grow, you're not going to have anybody do that. And it's going to be okay because you're in heaven, but sure will be nice. Think about great evangelists like Billy Graham and others that had thousands and thousands of people come to the Lord. He probably can't even rest because constantly there's going to be people coming up to him and shaking his hand and saying, thanks. Thanks. How about verse 7? By faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Now, I want you to think about Noah this morning. Here's an old man who God said, build a boat. He said, a boat? What's that? We live in a desert. Oh, it's going to rain. Rain? What's that? I've never seen water come from the sky. For 120 years, he built that ark. By what? Only the promise of God. That was it. That's faith, isn't it? Do you think he got ridiculed and people said, you're nuts? I believe he did. But he did it anyhow because he wanted to please God. What is it in your life that you can do that will please God that maybe somebody might condemn you for or criticize you for? It's coming, folks. we better get ready. It won't be long before we don't have the freedom we have today. And we have to take a stand. And I want you to remember the heroes of faith that pleased God. Do it. Verse 8. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. Abraham was rich. His father was rich. They lived in a great area, a nice probably house, lots of animals and lots of money. But God said, get out of there. And what does it say he did? He obeyed. He obeyed. Did that please God? Obeying God, does that please God? It sure does. Verse 10, for he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. What city is that he's talking about? Heaven. Did he ever see heaven? Did he ever have anything visually to talk about heaven? No. God said, I've got a place for you. Jesus said, I'm going to prepare a place for you. You've never seen it, but God's word said it's there. And you know what? Spiritual faith will make it happen. It'll make you believe it. If you don't, you're not pleasing God. These haters today, these deniers today, even in churches, they're not pleasing God. And what did it say? It's impossible to please God without faith. How about verse 13? These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them from afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on this earth. They never saw these things happen. They died before they could, but they still believed it. That's faith. That's faith. And we need to understand that. There's others here. There's 16 listed, but there's a bunch more. If you want to do a study those heroes of faith that we didn't go over this morning. And what I want you to do is, I want you to model them. I want you to take what we learned this morning and apply it to our lives, because we can. We've got more evidence than they ever had. So let's act on it, okay? Let's act on it. The heroes of faith. You should want to be one. You should want to be one. I always wanted to be a hero to my boys. I couldn't play football. Rusty's playing rugby now, Division I rugby. I could never play rugby. I could never do some of the things that they've done. Andy was an all-star defensive end for the entire East Coast. I could never do that. But that doesn't make you a hero. The hero comes when you're faithful and you want to please God. That's what it takes. That's what it takes.